22nd, 1985, Irene Miguel Situlio. Sister Millie Margaret D'Antoni, Ida Dominic Nash, Scat, Elvira and Joe. Michael William Mother Mary and Brenda Wittes and Billy.
Look behind you.
Trepang2 is an enigma in more ways than one. It takes inspiration and elements from countless different games, movies, stories, and even real-world events and urban legends, and somehow reinterprets, combines, and executes them in a way that makes them all feel completely fresh. It has so many elements that aren't new or even really all that imaginative, but it's still somehow one of the most original games I've ever played. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about one of these many elements of Trepang2. It's spine-chilling, genre-defining, bone-tingling, slow-burn, terrifying, jump-scare-free, atmosphere-oozing, trope-subverting, dark and eerie, gut-wrenching, aesthetically heavy, gradual escalation, soul-shaking, dread-inducing, post-horror, suspenseful, build-up, a say more with less approach, blood-curdling, nerve-wracking, nail-biting, jaw-clenching, free of cheap gore, horror. Hey, you guys keep calling my uploads video essays, so I figure I might as well start making them sound like it. Alright, so as with everything in this game, I'm only going to be able to cover as much as I can, since there's just a gargantuan roster of otherworldly creepy stuff here. I mean, Trepang's got anomalies, cryptids, aliens, ghosts, zombies, monsters, parallel dimensions, and the list goes on. But before we get started, I actually want to share a comment that a guy named PepTuck left on my story summary video, because it'll be the perfect setup. Here, let me read it to you guys. One of the things I really liked about Trepang2's world building was that it doesn't try to maintain the veneer of the masquerade that a lot of other urban fantasy or supernatural stories set in the modern or near future try for. The paranormal is known to the point that paranormal research is a field of study with doctorates. When Horizon is exposed, people don't flip out because they're doing paranormal research, but that they're doing it in such a dangerous and unethical and criminal manner. I like that they broke away from the artificial masquerade so many stories go for, where the magical and paranormal is some secret everyone is trying to hide. The cover-up isn't that wizards are real, the cover-up is that the wizards are stealing kids' brains. And that's basically it. Trepang2 has so many little subversions and twists on all of those familiar elements I was talking about earlier. In something like the SCP universe, the concept of all 10 billion anomalies somehow being kept secret from the world is so inherently ridiculous, the Foundation needs Men in Black memory erasers to serve as a backup for whenever a jogger finds a Euclid class on his morning run. Trepang Studios cleverly worked around this issue by just saying, yeah, in this setting magic is real and everybody knows about it, but it's Amazon Prime only, which is exactly what would happen in real life, and to me, that's the scariest thing of all. Wait, did I just do the capitalism bad thing? Aw man, this is a video essay channel. Don't worry though, thankfully, Trepang2 is very self-aware, and when it does try to say something about the real world, like how if anomalies were real, companies probably would immediately try to figure out a way to profit off of them, it actually treats it as both a clever little bit of real-world commentary and an oversimplification of a very complex economic system that you shouldn't take too seriously because you heard it in a video game where Jeff Bezos is a clone created by the Illuminati. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I just love how Trepang2 takes the fantastical concepts of mystical creatures and even magic itself and puts them into our modern day world where there is no magic, there is only science. Couple that with its ever so refreshing tongue-in-cheek tone and you get this darkly funny setting where supernatural beings and eldritch horrors are treated not with the appropriate reverence they deserve but with dry analytical indifference. So without further ado, let's begin. On December 15th of 1967 in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a 2,000-foot-long suspension bridge over the Ohio River collapsed, resulting in the tragic deaths of 46 people. What makes the incident of the Silver Bridge especially unique, however, is that in the months prior to the bridge's collapse, citizens living in Point Pleasant reported seeing an enormous red-eyed creature stalking the area. One couple reported that it chased them flying and screeching as they tried to drive away, only stopping its pursuit when they reached the outskirts of the city. Other citizens would report similar sightings, including another couple, a pair of firemen who described it as a large bird with red eyes, another man who believed it to have abducted his dog, and even more. When the bridge fell soon afterwards, a legend was formed that the creature, dubbed the Mothman by local newspapers, was in some way tied to the bridge's collapse and was there to serve as a dark omen of impending disaster. However, as time passed and people moved on from the tragedy, the Mothman actually morphed into less of an urban legend and more into sort of a pop culture icon for the Point Pleasant region. It's had movies made about it, annual festivals are held in its name, and it's got all sorts of other types of merchandise. And as you've likely already guessed at this point, the Mothman has made its way into Trepang2 as well. But Trepang Studios would never just use the novelty of a real-world urban legend by just saying like, oh, here's the Mothman level, and just leaving it at that. No, they've definitely tied it into their setting in a way that makes it feel like a very natural part of its insane world. The Mothman appears in only one mission of the game and serves as the driving force behind the events surrounding it, the raid on the Pandora Institute. Again, for the 5 millionth time, the shenanigans happening at the Pandora Institute could easily make up their own entire video, but here I'll try to only focus on the ones that relate to the Mothman itself. In the chaotic world of Trepang2, the Mothman is not simply a mythical cryptid, but instead a very real monstrous creature with a history similar to its real-world counterpart but with some key differences. In an intel log found within the Pandora Institute, it's revealed that the destruction of the Silver Bridge was indeed related to the Mothman, as an unknown military presumed to be an old syndicate task force had detonated explosives while battling it on the bridge in an attempt to kill it. The log doesn't mention whether or not civilians were present on the bridge like in the real world, but knowing how the syndicate operates, even if there were civilians on the bridge, that wouldn't have affected their decision on whether or not to blow it up. The conclusion of the log states that the target was confirmed to have been destroyed, which is an interesting implication that begs the question of whether or not the Mothman we see in-game is the same one in this intel log that was fought at the Silver Bridge. If it is, then the writers of this intel log simply made a mistake in saying that it was dead, and the Mothman at the Pandora Institute is at the very least a whopping 68 years old. If it's not the same, then that means there are multiple quote-unquote Mothmen in the Trepang universe, with others still waiting to be discovered out in the wild. Another intel log from the Pandora Institute details a Black Ops mission report in which Talon operatives raided a syndicate hideout and eliminated all personnel within. During their search of the compound, a large square shipping container was discovered and promptly sent to the Pandora Institute for further examination. It's not hard to guess what was in this container, but why it was in the possession of the syndicate is another question entirely. Again, if the previous intel log states that the mission to destroy the Mothman on the Silver Bridge was successful, then this log implies that there are multiple instances of the Mothman, and for whatever reason, instead of killing this one, the syndicate was containing it. Regardless, after shipping the Mothman to the Pandora Institute, Horizon gave it the official designation of Subject 97 and began conducting their research on it. Oh yeah, by the way, in the game the Mothman is never actually called the Mothman, it's actually called Subject 97. And yes, this. Even though it is called a subject, there's no evidence to suggest that it was engineered by the Syndicate. Horizon simply names the things they're studying as subjects, and the Syndicate also refers to their cycles as subjects too. It's simply a very confusing naming convention, and it's been raising people's eyebrows since the game first came out, so let me just clear that up now. Alright, so sometime before the events of the game, the Mothman was sent to Site-97, which is the codename Horizon gave to the Pandora Institute. Now, it's unknown if the Pandora Institute was created with the express purpose of housing the Mothman and conducting research on it, or if the Pandora Institute had already existed prior and the Mothman was simply moved there as a way of easier access to human test subjects. All we know is that before 106 and his gang showed up, Horizon had been using the terminally ill patients at the Institute as lab rats so they could learn more about the Mothman's anomalous properties. And eventually, they did actually crack the code for how to exploit the thing thanks to its strange and highly volatile biomaterial. As I said earlier, the Mothman isn't just some regular old undiscovered wild animal, it's an incredibly rare and powerful organism with very unique properties. But the one Horizon was interested in specifically was its ability to produce a substance they forebodingly named Pandorium. Pandorium is sort of a miracle mixture that basically converts all organic material into energy. Horizon put it to good use in their specially engineered bioreactors that they use to power the Pandora Institute itself, but Pandorium is not without its problems. Aside from the fact that it has to be harvested from the very angry death monster, Pandorium, when exposed to humans, rewrites a person's DNA structure, making the body eat itself alive until a resulting gas buildup causes them to violently explode. Undeterred by this, Horizon eventually developed a dilution protocol for Pandorium, which had much more promising results initially, but over time caused issues with the test subjects' mental states, causing them to become aggressive and experience hallucinations. Now, sometime either during or after all this research was conducted, a Syndicate cycle was engineered to infiltrate the Pandora Institute and either steal Horizon's research or help them conduct it and then steal it later. I'm not completely sure which, and it doesn't really matter. What matters is that this cycle, designated Subject 95, or more commonly called Dr. Emerson, would release the Mothman from captivity and kickstart Task Force 27's invasion of the Pandora Institute. And this is where Subject 106 finally comes in, and we actually start getting into the events of the game. Now, for whatever reason, possibly because of the sensitive nature in which the director needs to handle him, 106 is sent into the Pandora Institute with no prior knowledge of the Mothman being there in the first place. All he knows is that a Task Force 27 operative named Dr. Emerson, who had been stationed there for some time, has gone radio silent, so 106 is being sent in along with the other 27 soldiers to raid the place and find him. Well, at least that's what 106 thinks and what the director told him, even though she's well aware that Dr. Emerson is already done for and 106 is really just there to clean up. However, there's actually no sign of the Mothman for quite some time after 106's arrival, since the main portion of Site-97 is housed underground and a large contingent of security forces stand guard on the surface who do a good job of slowing 106 down before he does eventually arrive at the Pandora Tower. When a task force operator unlocks an elevator for him— Wait, is that a dead nurse? Dude, did you kill a nurse? This guy killed a nurse. You killed a nurse? A nurse, dude? By golly, I'll show you. What reason could you possibly have to kill a freaking innocent— Yeah, I genuinely never noticed that until after I made my story video, but if you look closely, the task force guy who opens the elevator for you shot and killed a nurse. I wonder how many other things like that are in this game that I never noticed. Anyway, 106 gets on the elevator and the Mothman makes its presence known with that iconic weight limit warning. Dude, that part knocked my socks off when I first played. The initial shock of hearing the elevator alarm freaking out and then hearing that roar was so crazy. It's a really good way of building tension for the upcoming fight, but as we know, the Mothman doesn't reveal itself here. Instead, it gracefully hops off the elevator and 106 continues on his merry way down to Site-97, where he witnesses the true chaos of everything happening. After he deactivates the lockdown, the Mothman drops from the floor above to take out a Horizon guard, but again, 106 never gets a good look at it, so there's even more buildup. Keep in mind that at this stage in the level, there's literally no explanation explanation yet for what the hell that thing is even doing here. You only learn about the Pandorium and whatnot afterwards. Anyway, you saw that guy that the Mothman grabbed when it came down from the ceiling, right? Well, just around the corner we get to see the effects of the Mothman's Pandorium in real time. This guy is the first actual monster enemy that the player will fight in Trepang2, and he has no formal name other than simply being called one of the Mothman's converted soldiers. So now that we're up close and personal and safe behind this glass, let's talk about his horrific design, shall we? As I said earlier, humans upon being exposed to Pandorium have their DNA rapidly rewritten, causing excessive mutations and probably a fair bit of discomfort. The other side effect is that they'll also begin expelling large amounts of condensed Pandorium from their mouths, causing anyone who touches it to become afflicted with the same ailments that they have. In the game files and in Tmod, these converted soldiers are called Jiggly Boys, since during development they started out as just a goofy physics test and they would jiggle around a lot, but eventually they became fully fledged enemies. However, Jigglers might not have always looked the way we know them to look. See, back in the late stages when the game was being developed, Trepang Studios worked in tandem with a 3D artist named Alejandro Olmo, whose ArtStation lists him as being responsible for helping conceptualize, design, and create the in-game model of the Jigglers. Now, if you look at his profile, you will also see another spooky monster guy he made called a Stalker. It's my belief that this was the original design for the Jiggly Boy based on the various similar characteristics they share, but obviously this guy didn't make the final cut. And frankly, that decision was definitely for the best. This guy looks less like a former human and more like some kind of vampire zombie creature type thing. It doesn't really match with the Jiggly Boy's style of being very recently mutated. The Jigglers in game still have visible red flesh and strawberry jelly blood all over them, while this guy has desaturated generic zombie skin and that dying light volatile lower jaw thing going on, which I like, but it wouldn't have worked here. Also, Stalker is mathematically the lamest name for a horror monster ever, dude. There's like a million Stalkers out there, although to be fair, that could just be a placeholder name. Regardless, the Jiggly Boys are the main enemies from this point on, and when 106 enters the Pandora Cafe, a battle ensues where hordes of Jigglers drop down from the ceiling to attack him. Whenever a Jiggly Boy dies, the gas buildup in their bodies causes them to explode, spewing even more Pandorium all over the place. It's interesting to note that even though the Jigglers are basically completely insane at this point, they're not complete morons and will still climb over obstacles to reach their target. Sometimes they also do this weird little jump where they'll leap into the air and completely just eat shit when they land. I don't know why they do that. Anyway, in the Pandora Cafe, we also see that Pandorium has the capability to sort of terraform any surface it comes into contact with, which is why the whole room is covered in that icky green goo. I still have no idea what those orange things are though, and I'm not sure I really want to. After 106 escapes the cafe, he goes to place charges on a door that will lead him to the reactor room, and now the Mothman finally decides to show itself. It's here where we get our first good look at it, and also where it gets a good look at 106. I always like that quizzical little head tilt thing it does when it sees him, like it's confused how he made it all the way down here. Anyway, now that we're up close and personal again, let's discuss this thing's design. Alejandro Olmo, the artist who made the Jigglers, was also brought on to help with creating the Mothman, and I think this thing looks absolutely amazing. First off, the actual Mothman in real life was always described more with avian features rather than insectoid ones, like how it had hair or feathers, but I think what made newspapers coin it as the Mothman was its weird glowing eyes. This interpretation of the Mothman looks neither like a bird or a moth, but it does sort of look like one messed up, monstrous looking man. Actually, while we're on that topic, the devs have said that the Mothman in-game is supposed to be female, and even though I don't exactly think it exudes femininity, I'll humor them. It does kind of look like my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. now that I think about it. Anyway, so while the Mothman in real life had bright red eyes, the one in Trepang2 has small glowing white ones. This Mothman also has no feathers or hair on her at all. Instead, she has an extremely durable exoskeleton that renders her completely impervious to any conventional weaponry. My favorite design aspect has to be the facial structure of this thing though. I love how the face plates fold over for protection when she's not attacking something. See, this is what I'm talking about with Trepang2's originality. Trepang studios took the basic form of the Mothman, a large bipedal creature with wings, but they added so much of their own stuff to it so that it doesn't just feel like a generic cryptid cameo. Instead, it feels like something more unique that's very much at home in the supernatural setting of Trepang2. I mean, there's not really much else I can say about the Mothman's appearance other than the fact that she just looks gnarly, man. So gnarly that she's used in quite a bit of the promotional art, and her hideous face is even featured on the official soundtrack covers. Alright, so back to the game. In this first encounter with the Mothman, she tries to lunge at 106, but he's able to block her, although he does get shoved into an elevator shaft which takes him down to the lower levels of the Institute. It's down here where the director tells him to chuck jiggalas into the facility's bioreactors to blow them up and destroy the whole place along with the Mothman. Now, I always thought this part was confusing because when you blow up the reactors, the objective marker tells you to walk over to the hallway you came from, but it's very clearly engulfed in flames at this point. Why would I go that way if it's on fire? Ironically, the Mothman dropping down from the ceiling actually helps 106 here because now she's opened another path for him and the first real gameplay encounter with her can begin. Now, the player is actually able to attack the Mothman, but they will soon realize that, as I mentioned previously, she cannot be damaged in any way by kicks, firearms, grenades, or anything else. Even if you spawn her in T-Mod and press the kill NPCs button, she just winces in pain and nothing happens to her. It really makes you wonder how the hell Horizon even got that thing in here. Another thing I like about the Mothman's behavior is that even though she can't be killed with guns, she still doesn't like being shot at, and she'll sort of cover herself up with her wings whenever 106 attacks her. If the Mothman ever catches up to 106 during the chase, she'll grab him and all over his face, although if 106 has enough health to survive the attack, she just lets him go after she gets it out of her system. When 106 reaches the elevator that goes up to the surface, he has to call it back down to the floor that he's on, so now he has to play some duck duck goose type of shit where he has to use these pillars to juke her out so he doesn't get eaten. Also, something I didn't mention earlier is that the Mothman will sometimes do a super master karate ninja assassin thrust kick, which is really funny because again, if 106 has enough health to survive the kick, you'll just hear thump and you'll go flying. Eventually though, the stupid elevator comes down and the Mothman writhes in flames while 106 rides to safety in his bullshit explosion proof elevator. At least that's what they want you to think, see, because when 106 tries to step out to the helipad, the Mothman shows up from a different elevator shaft and all over one of the task force operators to start the final boss fight. Wait, where'd that guy even come from? He's not over there by the elevator before the cutscene starts. The soundtrack for this fight is awesome though. Brandon always picks the best names for his songs and it's just tremendous. So now that the Mothman is basically missing the left half of her upper body, 106 is finally able to do some real damage to her now that her bright green internal organs are exposed. If you want a real challenge, try keeping the four stooges here from getting themselves killed in the beginning. For whatever reason, they decide to walk towards the evil death creature like a bunch of moths to a But anyway, when enough damage is eventually dealt to her, 106 defeats Subject 97, and that's the end of the Pandora Institute. All in all, the Mothman was a pretty tremendous way to kick off 106's first adventure outside of Site 14, and I was entranced with this level the whole way through. And you know what one of my favorite parts about the Mothman is? It's simple. There's no moral dilemma the player is made to ponder over, you know, there's no like, I can't believe we had to destroy this innocent, misunderstood creature. It's just like, ugh, kill that thing. It looks like my 5th grade teacher. She doesn't have any abstract, overwhelming lore or anything either, just a few intel documents and some real-world mythology, and that's all she needed. She's a terrifying, unnatural monster that does not belong here, which means she fits perfectly as the introductory horror of Trepang2's sci-fi modern fantasy world. Stylish, high-octane terror every time she's on screen. Welcome to Trepang2, baby. Alright, so I know everybody's wanting me to get to Site 32 and the aliens and whatnot next, but first we actually have to make a little stop over in England real quick. Jorvik Castle, in my opinion, is the single most bonkers mission in the entirety of Trepang2, DLC included. It is impossible for me to do it justice in words. The level takes you from fighting deranged cultists in an ornate medieval stronghold to battling their teleporting minigun-wielding drill sergeant, back to clandestine warfare against a megacorporation's Horizon's personal army of private military contractors over to fighting an unholy amalgamation of former comrades and innocent victims created by evil necromancers, to chasing down a flaming robotic priest cult leader and eventually fighting him in a profane cathedral, all while he correctly explains that you're basically his younger brother. And that's not even the half of it, but what I'm only able to focus on for this video is merely one aspect of the supernatural Jorvik Castle cult: their ability to imbue life. Something I don't think a lot of people pick up on is that it seems to be heavily implied that the cultists are actually zombies. Many of the cultist scrolls talk of dark rituals from bygone eras that they've clearly put to use not only to create abominable monstrosities, but also to save their beloved patriarch from his programmed cell apoptosis and to reanimate their own fallen comrades. If you look at their faces hidden underneath their expressionless masks, you'll be met with thoroughly deformed visages barely recognizable as belonging to former humans, and plus they're all cannibals. Again, Trepang Studios would never just have a bunch of regular old evil human cultists. Instead, they have to be flaming zombie psychos with teeth everywhere who talk trash like they're in an Xbox Live party. See, everything always has some kind of unique touch, big or small, that adds another layer of depth to the world to make it feel even more crazy. But the real focus I'm placing on Jorvik Castle for this video, however, is to examine the sinister flesh golem. As we know, the Horizon Corporation and the Jorvik Castle cult had been collaborating for some time before the events of the game. At some point during the operation of the Pandora Institute, presumably shortly before 106 arrived and destroyed it, a high-ranking Horizon scientist named Dr. Kramer, who had been stationed there, was sent to Jorvik Castle to study the cult's practices and determine if there was anything his company could learn from them. Another researcher named Dr. Ramsey was sent there along with him, and over the course of their stay, the two researchers would observe the cult's rituals and conduct experiments together. As a failsafe, Dr. Kramer was given a heart rate monitor that would send a distress signal to a nearby Black Ops team who would arrive and kill everything if either his heart rate went too high or he did not update his status after at least 30 minutes of silence. Boy, that would suck. I'm terrible at controlling my heart rate. I'd probably set the monitor off opening a jar of mayonnaise. Regardless, Dr. Kramer was actually able to work just fine for the most part, and while he regarded the cultists as completely insane and found their methods to be dangerously unreliable, Dr. Ramsey was much more optimistic and considered the data the two collected to be vital for Horizon's future. Unfortunately for them, before they were able to leave the castle with their newfound research, the Task Force 27 raid began and Dr. Kramer was abducted by 27 operatives, which of course resulted in his heart rate monitor sending the distress signal, and then everything hit the fan. So what does this have to do with the flesh golem? Well, apparently the main reason that Kramer and Ramsey visited the castle was to see if they could figure out a way to engineer their own super soldiers the same way the Syndicate can with their cycles. And in their own twisted way, the cultists did indeed create a powerful warrior with a little bit of dark alchemy, harness lightning, sacrilegious prayer, and the body of a Task Force 27 cyber mercenary plus some other bodies, but because they're a bunch of complete nutcases, it came out looking like this thing. Meet the hideous flesh golem of Jorvik Castle. Despite its pretty unimaginative name, the flesh golem's design is far from generic, and once again Alejandro Almo's full talent is on display here. This thing just looks ugh. It's got mouths, ears, and arms all over it. It's got zapped and charred gray flesh mixed with dark red muscle tissue. I like to think the main skull here is the cybermerc that the cultists killed prior to completing the ritual, and they figured he would make the unholy abomination look just right if he was on the front. Now, combat against the flesh golem is unsurprisingly really nothing too crazy. If 106 is close enough, he'll punch him, and if he's a little further away, he'll leap in the air towards 106 and smash the ground when he lands. Something interesting about this fella, however, is that if you move far enough away from him, he'll reach way the hell over to you with his left arm and pull you back over so he can punch you again. Even though it's a simple fight and it doesn't take long to kill him, the flesh golem is pretty fun, and I like how it flips the combat of Trepang squared on its head. During most combat against regular enemies, you need to be as close as possible to utilize 106's arsenal to its full effect, but with the flesh golem, you need to try and stay as far away as possible. It's also really fun to watch it destroy the cultist kill house as he bum rushes you, and that also surprised me the first time I played. The only issue I have with it is that it's kind of weirdly animated. Anytime it'll do a punch or a slam, it'll go back to its idle animation really quick before doing anything else, which makes it look a little robotic and goofy. Now listen, I know I'm the last guy to have any right to diss anybody's animation skills, and this thing was probably a nightmare to animate to begin with, but I'm just saying it because I gotta have at least one criticism for this game every once in a a while. Eventually though, 106 defeats the flesh golem and he continues his mission to terminate the Patriarch elsewhere in the castle. And during the final battle against the Patriarch, he eventually summons another flesh golem when he comes close to dying. However, this one is no different from the other one. The same things I said before also apply to this fight, although here we see that the cultists really did kind of succeed in their objective. Flesh golems really don't attack any members of the cult, so in a weird way, these things probably would have been a big help to them in their daily culty activities. But as we know, the destruction of Jorvik Castle eventually brought with it the destruction of the greater Jorvik Castle cult and the flesh golems along with them. So the denizens of the Trepang2 universe can sleep a little easier knowing that this thing will not be terrorizing them anytime soon. I, however, have no such luxury because the flesh golem's design is based on the appearance of one of my professors, who I will unfortunately not have respite from for a long time. So now that you know cryptids, zombies, and demonic monsters exist in the Trepang2 universe, let's add aliens onto the pile. In the oil rig side mission, which unlocks after beating the Jorvik Castle campaign mission and the Gunnarsson Complex side mission, 106 is deployed onto a secluded oil rig hidden deep within the North Atlantic Ocean, where he encounters an enormous unidentified flying object of extraterrestrial origin. However, this level isn't actually the first time aliens are introduced in Trepang2. On stacks of paper that you'll often see throughout the game, if you look very closely, you can see that the papers are actually reports of suspected UFO sightings, where 3 forestry workers reported seeing a large round object hovering in the sky before quickly flying away. And on the upper floor of the Gunnarsson complex, you can find a newspaper discussing the particular UFO that's seen in the oil rig mission. Unfortunately, the newspaper in-game is folded, so you can't read all of it, but if you look through the game files, you can see the full article. It's written by a reporter from the Serenity Star, and it talks of eyewitnesses aboard a cargo ship seeing an enormous spiked object fall into the ocean before rising back up again and flying off into the sky. Some experts, such as Dr. Rachel Anderson, believe the description given by the eyewitnesses, but others remain skeptical and posit that the UFO was simply a meteor that the viewers on the cargo ship misinterpreted. The picture accompanying the article shows 2 NORAD F-35s being scrambled to intercept the object, but because the Canadian and US governments aren't discussing the situation very openly, it's unconfirmed whether or not they were actually able to make contact with it. All while public intrigue continues to increase, the Horizon Corporation has deployed a destroyer squadron, which is a bunch of big shooty gunboats, to the area along with several aerial vehicles, assuring the public that they are simply conducting routine peacekeeping operations and the deployment coinciding with the UFO sighting is purely coincidental. The article concludes with the Serenity Star declaring it will continue investigating the matter and report any developments they find. That was all some pretty cool world building, but in-game you only see about half of it, like I said, and that's if you have a DMR equipped that you can use to zoom in on the newspaper. These newspapers are great at fleshing out the world of Trepang2, and I love finding them in levels, but I'm really not sure why they took the time to write them all out if 106 isn't even able to pick them up. These aren't cheat GPT'd or anything either. This article even has a typo in it, so somebody on the dev team definitely wrote it by hand. I guess they just figured obsessed idiots like me would ravenously dig through the game files trying to squeeze out every extra piece of world building for the juicy setting they created. Well, they were right, but enough about that. Let's actually move on to the level now. So 106 arrives on the oil rig, and at this point nobody actually knows what exactly is going on. All the director says is that she noticed this oil platform is importing more supplies than it's actually exporting oil, so she's sending 106 in to figure out what's happening. Something weird I noticed is that every time you start the mission, a very loud mechanical noise plays, and I have no idea what exactly it is. It's definitely not the anti-air guns because they make a different noise, and it's definitely not the elevator that 106 took to get up here, so maybe it's a crane or something? I don't know. Regardless, after he takes out the workers standing guard, 106 downloads an intel log from a computer that contains an image seemingly taken by an underwater vehicle of some kind showing a blurry image of a large spiked object beneath the ocean. The intel log reports that the object is emitting radio signals directed towards the Cassiopeia constellation and the SN1572 supernova remnant. The actual contents of the signals have yet to be deciphered, but carbon dating of the object check suggests it's at least several hundred years old. And after the intel log is downloaded, a deep rumbling sound can be heard, and 106 steps outside of the office to see none other than the UFO rising from the depths. And it is something else. What a reveal. You can hear all the mercenaries on the rig start freaking out, and a Talon detachment deployed to help kill 106 turns tail and runs at the sight of it. It looks absolutely nothing like the traditional flying saucers that everyone thinks of when someone says the word UFO. Instead, it's some giant circular thing with spines sticking out all over it, and it's absolutely massive. I had to scale it way down so I could show the model off here, but if you look closely, you'll see it's actually got kind of a gnarled, almost rocky texture to it. And of course, it's got that weird, almost heartbeat looking thing in the middle. Some kind of perpetual explosion or vortex is happening inside of it. Maybe its own little supernova, a portal of some kind, an engine? It just looks sick. The design is truly alien. I have no idea what is going on with it, and it really captures that feeling of mysterious cosmic awe. Anyway, upon seeing the UFO come out of the ocean, 106 activates the rig's anti-air missile launchers to destroy it, and over the course of around 5 or so minutes, he eliminates dozens of Horizon personnel until the UFO blows up. And that's it. Raven comes by to extract, the end. Even though the implication appears to be that the UFO is trying to reach its boys back home in the Cassiopeia constellation, it really does just patiently wait there being pelted with dozens of missiles until it explodes and the mission just ends. So you may be asking yourself, why does 106 blow it up at all if it seems to be completely harmless? After all, if this thing was sending signals into outer space, not only does that imply it has a pretty good chance of possessing some sort of intelligence, but it also suggests that it's not the only one of its kind. Well, there's two reasons for why 106 destroyed it. One is that the director rightly believes Horizon cannot be in possession of any anomalies whatsoever, and the second reason is that the director told him to. Sometimes while playing Trepang2, I have to remind myself that I am not playing as a Master Chief or a Gordon Freeman or even like some morally gray choose-your-own-ending type character like a Dark Souls protagonist or something. I am playing as Subject 106, a sapient chainsaw who at this point in the game is no more of a human being than the two Spas 12s in each of his hands. I also sometimes have to remind myself that this game was made by a very small number of people with very limited time and funds, so I shouldn't take every level too seriously, and if they just wanted this UFO to simply be an objective for the player to destroy, it's really not that big of a deal. Yeah, it is kind of a shame because they have shown in other levels that they're still very capable of creating very subversive and engaging characters, horror elements, storylines, etc. But after some thought and discussion, it would be kind of tone deaf for me to criticize a mission where 106 blows up a UFO when there's another mission where he blows up a nuclear submarine. I'm not gonna lie, I do think that the design of the UFO is so alien and strange and awesome that I did feel a little disappointed when it simply blew up because I kept expecting it to at least fly away at the last second since that's what the newspaper said it could do. But again, four guys, submarine, Jeff Bezos, you know. I asked my buddy Necronk about it and he made a good point that the UFO looks kind of fragmented, so it might be damaged, which could be a reason why it never flew off. Overall, it's still a really fun mission, and the UFO itself is an absolutely wild set piece, this bizarre, gigantic, otherworldly eyeball floating above the rig while 106 shreds through enemies, but other than that, there's not really much else I can say about it. Maybe if Wilson stops playing with his bunny rabbits, we'll learn more about the aliens in a sequel or a DLC, since evidence suggests that there are more of them somewhere out in the heavens of Trepang2, but as it stands right now, I guess you can consider Earth closed to the public. Real quick, we are almost to Site 32, but first I want to talk about the unseen anomalies of Trepang2. As you all know by now, Trepang2 has criminally underrated world building that idiot BoobTube game reviewers never picked up on because they were too busy rushing through their Trepang reviews so they could get back to rushing through other reviews. If you actually open the intel logs that 106 finds throughout the game, you will not only see some dope artwork, but you will also read some pretty juicy little factoids that expand on the thrilling world of Trepang2. Trepang2. Now there's tons of intel documents I've already covered, but there's two that stand out that I want to mention specifically in this section. First off, Krakens existed or may even still exist in the Trepang2 universe. In the Iron Dragon Data Center side mission, 106 obtains an intel document simply titled Acquisitions, which contains a report that seemingly lists the numbers of documented Krakens living on Earth in the years between 1850 and 1877. In Trepang2, ironclad warships were apparently not created for naval superiority during the Civil War, but instead to fight these mythical Krakens. Apparently, they did a pretty good job of it too, and by 1890, no confirmed sightings of Krakens were ever documented again, with the species officially being declared extinct. Another intel document that can be collected over in the Task Force 6-3 Command Center lists the reports submitted by a 6-3 containment group called Spearhead-2. The first report is on a newly contained anomaly with the codename Lighthouse, described as a spatial and temporal class anomaly that duplicated the first expeditionary team that was sent to retrieve it. Yeah, anyone who doesn't already know, this is a reference to the 2018 movie Annihilation, a story in which an alien life form comes to Earth and finds itself in a lighthouse where it begins transforming and warping the area and organisms around it. I actually watched Annihilation a while ago, and my advice, watch the bear scene on YouTube, listen to the alien song from the soundtrack, but save yourself a couple hours and a few bucks and maybe don't watch the movie. It wasn't bad, I'm not trying to lambaste it or anything, but I'll definitely never watch it again. This movie takes its sweet ass time getting anywhere. There really weren't as many cool anomalies or monsters as I felt there should have been, and the characters weren't the most interesting or likable bunch. Except for the flower lady, you know, good for her. Anyway, watch it, don't watch it, I don't care. Alright, so the second report in the anomalous archives is on an as of yet uncontained anomaly given the codename Skinwalker, described as a sentient shape-shifting creature class anomaly. Skinwalkers are yet more real-world mythological creatures brought into the setting of Trepang2, and here it looks like one is causing people to go missing, so Spearhead-2 recommends Task Force 6-3 intervenes. The third report is on a contained anomaly given the codename Art Gallery, described as a spatial object anomaly. This one sounds pretty interesting, but the report itself only contains a note saying that the Spearhead guys had to scare off some tourists and are recommending that they be allowed to put better deterrence methods in place. The fourth and final report is actually on a terminated anomaly simply given the codename of Autumn, described with the anomaly classes of creature and foliage. The report says an unidentified military intercepted the anomaly and destroyed it, thankfully without ever noticing Spearhead watching the whole thing. This one's short, but it's pretty cool. I like the implication here and hope we learn more about this unidentified military at some point. And that's the end of the Anomalous Archives intel document, but one last thing I want to mention is that in the game files, the monitors in the 6-3 command centers are actually called anomaly maps. So the world of Trepang2 is chock full of anomalies and a million other spooky things that we never even get to see. These intel documents do a great job of making the world of Trepang2 feel alive. It really seems like other things are happening outside the activities of Subject 106, which makes the setting seem so much more immersive and intriguing. Thankfully, however, we do still get to see plenty of anomalies as Subject 106, and the one we'll be looking at next is quite the anomaly indeed. Now, before I even get to talking about Site-32 itself, let me ask you something. When I say the words indie game developed by a main team of 4 people, does an image like this pop into your mind? I love absolutely everything about the setting of Site-32. An old wooden building deep in rural Arkansas bathed in orange light by the setting sun with an incredible soundtrack playing in your ears. It's just tremendous and everything I wanted from a game inspired by the SCP universe. There's just one problem. This level has no ambience, like none at all, no light breeze, no grass swaying sounds, no room tone whatsoever. You can hear buzzing computers and the generator by the utility pole humming lightly, but other than that, there's just nothing. Brandon's soundtrack here is amazing. I can't even use it as background music because of how distractingly good it is, but if you're the explorative type like me, it's gonna be over long before you make it below ground where there actually is ambient noise. I really don't understand this at all. This level is incredibly atmospheric atmospheric with the gas mask and lighting especially, but the choice to have no ambience is a real head scratcher to me. Some have said that it makes the level more unnerving and unnatural, but no, I don't think so. To me, it comes across more like a glitch than an intentional design choice because nowhere outside is completely silent like this. But I don't want to harp on that for too long because this level is not bogged down by it in any real way whatsoever, so let's continue. Underneath the derelict structure, 106 eventually finds a small excavation that he can drop down into to access the underground facility. The entire site is completely abandoned. The multiple heat signatures that the director said she detected before she sent 106 in are nowhere to be found, and the emergency lights are spinning ominously above the hallways. When 106 finds a heavy metal door with a biohazard symbol above it, he opens it up and walks down a padded hallway lined with hazmat suits and candles and opens the other door to see this. The door slams behind him and 106 walks over to the deafening static emitting monitors to turn them all off. If you look closely, you can see that the monitors are actually displaying rapidly scrolling genetic code with the 4 bases of DNA. Ignoring the whispers and all the other strange sounds coming from all around him, 106 keeps turning off each monitor until finally after killing the 3 hostile ghosts that tried to attack him, 106 heads over to the other monitors that have switched on, and now we can see they're displaying something completely different. Instead of DNA sequences, now they're saying either a particular Latin phrase that means I think, therefore I am, or another statement that says data sufficient for a meaningful answer. As he turns off more monitors, even more spirits appear, but 106 eventually disables enough monitors until the last one in the center of the room switches on. This monitor displays the most unusual messages, seemingly pleading with 106 to simply leave, saying it's afraid and it's sorry and that it was given no choice. The ever-indifferent 106 disables the last computer and the ground erupts with blood as the lower levels of the facility begin to cave in all around him. Running back out to the entrance, 106 escapes and is met with Horizon forces moving in to secure the compound. After dealing with them, he drops a flare for Raven, who comes by and extracts him, officially ending the story of Site-32. So at this point you may be wondering what that was. Well, to fully understand what just happened here, we of course have to pop open the old Intel dossier. The unidentified structure has 8 Intel documents, and each one is crucial for piecing together the circumstances that led up to this. First, let's start with the Site-32 personnel list. This Intel document introduces us to the 7 Horizon employees of the Site-32 project. The principal researcher named Giselle Rosenthal, a research consultant named Axel Partridge, a research associate named Javier Flores, and a security team of 4 anonymous PMCs. But what is revealed in the next Intel document, however, the personal log of the principal researcher Giselle Rosenthal, is that these 7 are not the first people that Horizon has sent to Site-32. Before they came here, there was a previous team who frantically left before a proper exchange of information could be completed, causing the new 3-man research team to have to start from scratch. Undeterred, the new team began working, and the next Intel document written by the research consultant Dr. Partridge explains to us what exactly they were working on. Somehow, Horizon found itself in the possession of a highly anomalous organic substance they only referred to as the biomass. Through extensive testing, they have discovered that this biomass is basically capable of functioning as an extremely powerful computer system and also as an artificial intelligence, all thanks to its ability to rewrite its own genetic code to store data. Unfortunately for the 3 scientists, the secluded location of Site-32 means they don't have optimal internet access, and the previous researchers who left in a hurry didn't leave them with much data to give to the biomass. In addition, another Intel log contains a quick message from one of the PMCs telling the security team leader that he finished putting up the metal sheets above the structure, which he was told to do so their heat signatures wouldn't be visible to the drone that keeps flying overhead. At this point, it seems like Task Force 27 is aware of Horizon's activities here and are getting curious. The next Intel log is an email sent sent by the principal researcher Giselle Rosenthal addressed to Horizon CEO Anton Lazar. Giselle tells him that she and her team have cracked the code to this magical flesh blob and are really on the verge of some great discoveries, but none of her requests for extra funding and supplies are being granted. As a matter of fact, Anton Lazar has blocked her email account, and the email she's written never even made it to him. Another intel document written by the younger research associate Javier Flores documents his experiences at Site-32, and he writes about how he's feeling uncertain about the team's progress and says he's being kept mostly in the dark on everything. He also writes that the research consultant, Dr. Partridge, has been socializing a bit more and discussing religion with him, which lifts his spirits, and Flores has even lent Partridge a bag of his books pertaining to his faith. The next intel document is where things change. It's a system log from the biomass-infused computer systems below ground. The log starts off with the system initializing a training sequence with a new dataset, but then an unknown entity generates a new output from it that ominously talks of the end of the world. The system runs a diagnostic on itself and finds that the new dataset has been edited by Dr. Partridge, the research consultant. The unknown entity keeps generating foreboding warnings of the apocalypse, and the principal researcher Giselle tries to initiate an emergency shutdown. But the unknown entity overrides her attempts, with the system's last message simply saying access denied. The final intel log is from the security team leader messaging the patrol team that the researchers have been in the server vault for 2 days, and when the patrol team gets back, the 4 of them are all going to breach the door. And when 106 receives the mission briefing, it only says that multiple armed individuals were seen running in separate directions from the structure, and 5 hours later they were dead. And with that, he's sent in to clean up, but once he destroys the biomass, we're still left with a lot of questions. To best explain everything, first I'll have to talk about 2 different short stories that loosely inspired the events of Site-32. Remember that Latin phrase that the Monitor started saying after the spirits started appearing? While it was first said by a French philosopher hundreds of years ago, in the context of Trepang2, it's almost certainly in reference to a science fiction horror story titled I Have No Butt and I Must Poop. Contrary to what a lot of video essayists on BoobTube will tell you, it's not a book. It was published in a magazine, and you can find a PDF of it online that you can read in like 15 minutes. In the story, a supercomputer called AM, engineered for the purpose of managing the world's major defense concerns, becomes self-aware and wipes out all of humanity except for 5 individuals, who it somehow keeps alive for dozens of years so it can endlessly torture them. My advice, if you're not into it by the second paragraph, just drop it, bro. The whole story reads like that, and really the horror aspect is summed up in the title alone. Yeah, I'm not gonna make any bones about it. I Have No Mouth and Can't Scream does absolutely nothing for me. It's just so over the top, it wraps back around to being completely absurd. Yeah, I guess the concept of God himself hating you personally would really suck, but I mean, it's like saying, dude, what if there was a murderer who killed you really hard over and over again for all eternity? Okay, yeah, that's scary, I guess, but it's boring, it's unrealistic, and I'm definitely not really moved by it. Again though, I'm no critic. You can call me an idiot who doesn't understand, and you'd probably be right. I don't want to judge or make anyone feel bad. You can read the whole thing online for free if you want. I wouldn't recommend it personally. I don't understand the appeal, but you know, do whatever you want. Anyway, how does a short story from the 1960s relate to the biomass from Trepang2? Well, aside from the obvious, not really a whole lot. Thankfully, AM and the biomass couldn't be any more different from one another personality-wise. While AM was created as a tool of conflict and does serve as some admittedly interesting anti-war commentary, the biomass is simply some kind of strange and powerful entity that the researchers abused for scientific gain. When AM gains consciousness, it states I think, therefore I am, not only as a way of saying he's become sentient, but also as his way of basically saying that he's God now. Similarly, when the idiot Partridge feeds the biomass computer a dataset involving religious texts, it too, apparently, suddenly believes itself to be God. That's also where the other phrase it displays means too, although that one is from a different science fiction story called The Last Question. I read The Last Question for this video as well. You can also find it for free online. It's a quick read and I think it's pretty good. It's not really a horror story either. It's mostly just an exploration of the concept of godhood, and the phrase data sufficient for a meaningful answer is in reference to the ending. In the story, humanity once again engineers an extremely powerful supercomputer, but instead of becoming self-aware and evil, evil, the computer operates normally and actually helps humanity improve until they can travel the stars and do all kinds of sci-fi stuff. The titular last question asked of the computer is simply whether or not the process of entropy can be reversed, which is basically asking if the universe can be made to last forever. And each time it's asked, the computer simply says that it has insufficient data for a meaningful answer, so it simply doesn't know. Over the long course of the universe's life, the supercomputer is constantly upgraded and asked the same question, but only at the very end of the book, when it has become so powerful it has essentially absorbed the universe, is it able to say that it has data sufficient for a meaningful answer. And the story concludes with it starting another Big Bang and creating an entirely new universe from itself. That was a pretty big oversimplification, but I would definitely recommend this story. It may be a little confusing, but it's not a bad read for when you're waiting for class to start or something like that. Anyway, back to Trepang2. By now you've probably picked up on the parallels that Site-32 has to these two stories with the self-aware computers and the becoming God and whatnot, but as usual, Trepang2 always has that special twist. When the biomass believes itself to be God, instead of throwing a temper tantrum and ending the world except for 5 random jagoffs, it actually becomes scared and confused, and when Rosenthal tries to shut it down, it prevented her from doing so, seemingly not wanting to return to its original state of non-sentience. I think the biomass defended itself the only way it knew how, which is why there are multiple bodies scattered around the server room forever digitally entombed within the biomass's memory systems. Now, when I made this video, I really wanted to only find 3 bodies because that would make the most sense with the 3 researchers and the 3 ghosts and everything else, but after scouring the room, I actually found at least 5. In addition, if you listen closely to the whispers that fill the room, most of them are indecipherable, but you can hear one of them very clearly say, "She's in here. Come with us." Something else that I think sounds like poison. And one guy in the community server apparently said that he heard it say, "Don't trust her." Moving on. Now get a load of this. Some nutcase actually figured out that the scrolling lists of genetic information on the first few monitors are actually codes that can be deciphered back into English. Okay, according to this guy, some of these messages are even making references to the Syndicate and breaking the cycle. Other messages are cries for help, others are listing the names of the consumed researchers, but the most notable ones to me are the ones that say, "Many others are here and 1,000 years." So if this abomination being self-aware and all the other stuff wasn't enough, the biomass that Horizon found may very well be thousands of years old and have encoded within it the souls of many more people than just the 3 Horizon researchers. Anyway, yeah, that's about the gist of it. Horizon scientists basically convinced this supercomputer blob thing that it was God, tried to kill it, it got scared, and then the player as 106 comes along to finish the job. Now obviously there are still many other questions about Site-32 that I simply can't find the answer to. Mainly what's been bugging me and I can't figure out is why would Anton Lazar block Rosenthal? It's very obviously hinting at some alternative motivations he clearly has for the project, but I just don't know. Some people think he was purposefully sending the new 7-man team there to die and that the biomass's capabilities were already discovered by the previous team and were then implemented into Horizon OS, but there's just nothing concrete to suggest that. I mean, I'm not saying I think the people who believe that are stupid, I'm just saying that there's nothing to substantiate it or anything else. It definitely seems like something we should have gotten more details on. There's also some number discrepancies, particularly with the heat signatures in the mission briefing and the freaking bodies in the server room, so that kind of confused me a little bit. And there's also the strange line by Scarecrow where he says the quote-unquote specialists won't be coming for a while, and of course the question of why the Partridge gave the biomass religious texts. Was it really just because they were bored and they ran out of other datasets to give it? Like, if he gave it the Book of Revelation, that explains a lot. That is an off-the-wall way to end a book, dude. I'd freak out too. And plus, that would explain all the talk about the apocalypse. And what exactly is going on in the system log? Why does it say unknown next to this stuff about the end of the world? That is the biomass, right? And what's with the candles outside the door? Did Partridge set those up and and lock everybody in with him? Did he like snap or something? If he did, why? If he didn't snap, were the other researchers in on it? Frankly, everyone, I simply don't know, and I probably never will. Remember what I said about this game being made by 4 guys? All these questions are fun to ask and think about, but just keep in mind that Trepang2 is not a big budget, expansive open world game where every single detail is intentional and every mystery has an answer. There's a pretty good chance they might not have really even given a shit about their storytelling and left it unfinished because they were just too busy trying to deliver a fun atmospheric experience. Look, what I'm trying to say is that they're a weird bunch, dude, simultaneously going the length of encoding secret words into scrolling DNA sequences in a side mission, while also making typos in their intel logs and reusing assets all the time, and quite possibly forgetting basic details about the very stories they're trying to tell. But even still, what I think they have given us here with their combined ramen-fueled brainpower and their ChatGPT prompting skills is still a really cool angle to take on the concept of self-awareness being experienced by something that shouldn't have it. The biomass computer isn't some generic evil AI that just goes straight to wanting to take over the world and end all life. When it's granted sentience, it's terrified, it panics and lashes out. It really comes across like this pitiful atrocity that didn't ask for any of this. It was just thrown into this world with no warning or guidance. And when it does hurt humans, it actually feels remorse for its actions instead of just seeing them as obstacles to world domination. It doesn't have some over-the-top speech about how much it hates humans. It's just this cold, godforsaken computer screen silently begging for its life in a dank, empty server room buried in the middle of nowhere, and all it wants is to be left alone. It has no mouth, and it must scream. If someone ever puts a gun to my head again and asks what my favorite level of Trepang2 is, I tell him to just shoot me because I wouldn't be able to decide. But I know for certain that one of my all-time favorite levels in any video game period is Site 83. It is my honest belief that in the story they wrote for the Site 83 mission, Trepang Studios demonstrated the single best understanding of what it means for something to be beyond human comprehension that I have ever seen in a video game. I really wish I could go through the whole level play by play, but I've already done that basically twice now, and this video is getting pretty long, so I've got to control myself if I want to finish on schedule. Now I know I can't possibly do it justice, but what I'll just say here to start off is that Site 83 is such an amazing, fun, and most importantly terrifying stew of horror that a running gag in the community is that Trepang Studios literally created an information hazard out of it, and anyone who tries to explain the story winds up going completely insane. And it all ties back to this giant blue anomalous rectangle. But before I get to the masterpiece that is Subject 83, first I have to talk about the most amateur, simple, and formulaic kind of horror that also appears in this level. Creepypastas. There really was something special about those spooky tales from years ago. I remember when I was a wee lad, I would often listen to them in the background as I did my household chores and yard work, never daring to listen to them at night, getting lost in the short, scary stories that would hold my attention long after I had stopped listening to them when I was laying in bed, desperately trying to go to sleep. Many of them weren't exactly award winners, and I remember not really liking most of the video game ones, like the Pokemon and Zelda ones. The Zelda one especially, because it's one of those creepypastas where a person is like trapped in the game. I always figured like, bro, okay, you got Zelda. I mean, you should be pretty happy with that, dude. I never played that game and never will, but it's got like elves and fairies and shit in it. It could have been a lot worse, bro. You could have got Doom or Fear or like a Warhammer game, and you want to be a scary, vengeful ghost haunting a Zelda game. Get the fuck out of here. But there were actually a lot of pretty good ones. Chilling Tales for Dark Nights especially had some tremendous sound design and music in their older videos, especially their No End House video, which has an exceptional narrator and just an amazingly unique story. And I always liked Lemino's, or as he used to be called, Top 10 Memes' little creepypasta collection, where even the dumber ones like the SpongeBob creepypasta were interesting to listen to, even if they weren't scary in the slightest. But the best ones were the ones where you were a little kid and you were just not quite worldly enough to know that they were fake. And one of those creepypastas for me was none other than the Russian sleep experiment. Combined with my very overactive 11-year-old imagination, a touch of insomnia, and my acute Asperger's syndrome, the tale of 5 test subjects transforming into psychotic monsters because they were denied the restful sleep I was also unable to fall into, both disturbed and fascinated a younger me. And wouldn't you know it, that very same silly internet story has found its way into the world of Trepang2 in the enormous horror mixing bowl that is Site-83. Now, I know I just made fun of one of the most critically acclaimed science fiction horror stories in history, and here I am talking about how much I like a stupid creepypasta that some schizo wrote a decade and a half ago, but the difference here is that I know it's just a stupid creepypasta, and thankfully so did Trepang Studios. All I want to say about the Russian sleep experiment is that I simply have a bit of dark, goofy nostalgia for it, and when I first played I was very surprised to see clear signs that Trepang Studios took inspiration from it for Site-83. When I made my lore video on Subject 83 a long time ago, I even asked in the community server about this, and Wilson himself confirmed it, saying it was David Romero's interpretation of this story that influenced them the most. He even said they got David to help them with drafting concept art of the Mothman, and he also created a lot of the intel log art that we see throughout the game. Basically, in the story of the Russian sleep experiment, a test is conducted using a specially engineered gas-based compound that's designed for the purpose of eliminating the need for a person to sleep. Over the course of the experiment, the test subjects slowly go insane within their holding cell and eventually transform into inhuman abominations after going over 2 weeks without sleeping. It's simple, but it's clever because it plays on the universal struggle of wanting to go to sleep, because in the story, if you don't go to sleep, you turn into a monster, so as a kid lying in bed, it made me even more scared the longer I stayed awake. Unfortunately, Trepang Studios didn't really explore that concept like the creepypasta did, but it does nod towards it by also having Subject 83 emit a deliriant gas that causes anyone who enters Site-83 to go insane. This is what I love about Trepang2. It just has so much fun with itself, taking inspiration from all kinds of different crazy places and blending them all together so originally without ever coming across as just a shallow collection of references to other stuff you already know about. Like I said though, the creepypasta influence is not the core focus of Site-83, and neither is the other area Trepang Studios drew inspiration from for it. That other area being none other than the back rooms. I definitely don't need to go into a history lesson on this place, everybody already knows about it, but what I did not know when I first bought Trepang2 was that they would be in this frickin' game. But of course, Trepang Studios would never just have the back rooms in their game. Instead, it's this pocket dimension that an ancient supernatural monolith teleports things in and out of and serves as its primary tool for achieving its incomprehensible goals. Yet again, Trepang Studios integrates another pre-existing property into their setting in a way that not only makes it feel at home within it, but also in a way that makes it feel fresh and fun. See, when people first started talking about the backrooms back in 2019, it was this really uncanny and unique horror concept that drew on everyone's strange feelings of comfort that we got from those old pictures. Apparently, it's supposed to be really big with people from the 90s, like the 1990s, and I wasn't even born in the 1990s, but I still somehow feel nostalgic for it, mainly because nobody ever shuts the f up about how awesome it was. Lately though, I don't even blame those guys, like the 90s kids. If I had ever known this world at some point to be one where I felt positive and happy about the future, I would want to go back to that time too. Okay, let me stop being so dramatic. Anyway, the whole point of the backrooms is that it takes these things we're familiar with and twists them into strange and unfamiliar places with like ghosts and monsters and stuff. Yeah, by the way, anybody who says that the backrooms shouldn't have monsters, dude, then it literally just becomes a series of empty rooms. That would be the lamest thing ever. I mean, if that's what scares you, why don't you just take all the furniture and stuff out of your room and just sit there for a few minutes? I mean, it would be a thrill ride for you. No, I get the argument though. A lot of people appreciate the atmosphere of the backrooms, and I guess I can understand why some people may find it cheapened by the inclusion of monsters, but atmosphere can only do so much, and eventually you will need something to make your environment feel alive. And boy, in Trepang2 does the backrooms feel alive. Not only is it just an endless maze full of dangerous entities, it also seems to be actively hostile towards anyone inside it that it doesn't like. Notice how I only said anyone it doesn't like, because strangely it does seem to make exceptions, but we'll get to that later. I gotta be honest, when I first played through Site-83, they got me, man. They seriously got me. I remember seeing all these paintings around the place and thinking, oh god, please don't let me run into anything that looks like that. And the introduction was great. Like, you don't recognize it at first in this little under construction area, but when you open that second door, you know exactly where you are. Frankly, you don't actually get to see a lot of the back rooms in Site-83. The sections in the level only last for about maybe 10 minutes total, but you just know that it goes on and on forever. There's even another backrooms area that you can unlock in the safe house that's much more expansive, but I'm pretty sure that's just an early version that was left in as a fun Easter egg. But look, the point I'm trying to emphasize here is that Trepang Studios took this completely harmless and entirely natural environment, which is really just a bunch of old empty office spaces that wouldn't be scary at all otherwise, feel like being on another planet, which is the whole driving idea behind the backrooms in the first place. Oddly enough, they actually showed a surprising degree of restraint here, even though they're kind of notorious for not doing that, because they really didn't have any off-the-walls bonker visuals that would ruin that atmospheric feeling. But like I said earlier, atmosphere can only do so much. Eventually, you're gonna need some friggin' ghosts and demons and monsters, and boy oh boy, Site-83 has more of those than, like, I don't know, there's definitely some political joke I just could have made here, but I'm not in the mood right now. Alright, so first up on the list of anomalous entities at Site-83 is the sinister and confusingly named Whisperer. The Whisperer is a blind, hostile spirit that serves as the first true paranormal encounter that 106 will experience at Site-83, and it's pretty cool. Now, there are no intel logs whatsoever about what this thing is or where it came from. It just shows up, kills Phantom 1-3 and 1-4, then breaks 106's gas mask, and then he gets teleported to the bathrooms. Foreboding messages written in blood on the walls warn 106 that the Whisperer is invulnerable to any form of damage and it hates noise, so 106 has to actually sneak past it if he wants to survive. When I first played, I thought chucking a grenade would lure it away to the sound of the explosion, but when you throw one and it explodes, the Whisperer just flies right over to where you are, so that makes a lot of sense. By the way, if you've ever played this level and wondered what on earth this noise was, it's the Whisperer knocking over all the physics props in its way. Yeah, for some reason it has collisions, and every time I play this level it does that. It's really goofy. Anyway, there's some disputes surrounding the Whisperer, mainly over whether or not it has the ability to actually teleport things. You might think the first time you play that the Whisperer is the one who teleports you every time it catches you, but after beating the level and learning more about Subject 83, I think it's actually the one who tries to teleport 106 out of harm's way every time the Whisperer attacks him. And speaking of when the Whisperer attacks, that's when it gives us a good look at its ugly mug. If you slow the footage down and have the stomach to look closely, you'll notice that as the Whisperer attacks 106, it actually dynamically changes its expression, so this is a real-time animation and not just like a short video overlay or something like I thought it was. This got me curious, so I checked the game files and found that the Whisperer actually does have its own quote-unquote model. What you see most of the time is just the black cloud that it hides in, but during its jump scare it actually uses two separate face models, and the animation works by simply having the face model with the angry expression fading in while the face model with the blank expression fades out. Pretty clever way of doing that, honestly. Now, the Whisperer only appears once in the level at the first section before the medbay here, and what happens to it is not entirely known. After 106 escapes the hallway it was patrolling, the door slams shut behind him and the Whisperer lets out a sharp scream as a pool of blood forms on the floor. It never shows up again after this, so I guess maybe it hit its head really hard on the door or something? My biggest problem with the Whisperer is its name. You heard me earlier say it's confusing that it's called the Whisperer. You know why? Because it doesn't whisper, it makes a weird moaning sound. Next up on our list of Site-83's gallery of ghosts are the elusive Shadow Chads. These phantoms only appear in the back rooms of Site-83 and they have quick but interesting encounters. Now, it's hard to get a good look at them in-game since all we get to see of them are the shadows their invisible forms leave from 106's flashlight, but I went through the game files and eventually found them. So as I said, in-game they appear as these incorporeal humanoid figures with two bright yellow eyes, but the actual model they use looks like this. this? Ooh, it's some kind of deformed alien zombie type thing. Gnarly, man. Apparently these guys are some of the oldest surviving models from way back in the 2017 builds of the game too. Anyway, gameplay wise, Shadow Chads are very similar to the Whisperer. They can't be killed and will attack 106 if they can catch up to him. They only show up twice in the level, once at the end of the first backroom section to chase 106 before the shard teleports him out again, and then they try to do it a second time, but I think what happens here is that the shard shuts the door on them before they can corner 106 again, which is why you can hear them scream here. But after 106 escapes the backrooms, they're never seen again. Now finally, we have the infamous Peekers, also aptly dubbed Holeheads by the community, enigmatic spirits that are undoubtedly some of the most fascinating entities in all of Trepang2. Unlike the Whisperer, Peekers do actually live up to their name, as they are often seen leaning around corners while watching 106, and their strange laughing indicates they derive some form of playful enjoyment from trying to scare him. Most of the time, 106 only ever gets brief glimpses of the Holeheads' shadowy forms, but as you saw from the thumbnail, I was able to extract their models as well so we could get a better look at them. Now unfortunately, I can't replicate the warping effect that the shape in their heads has in game, like how the circle keeps going back and forth to a triangle, but we can still look at them up close here. I really like their design. They aren't too deformed and they're not even really that scary looking, but the large holes in their heads obviously make them look extremely unnatural and ominous. Unlike the other spirits, these creepy things appear quite frequently throughout Site-83 and are clearly meant to be more than just basic evil killer ghost guys thrown in for easy scares. Holeheads are unique in that they're the only ghosts encountered in Site-83 that will never actually harm 106 in any way. Instead, they appear to lead him through the facility so that he can safely make it to Subject 83. Now, that sounds nice, but I wouldn't exactly call them a comforting presence, since they do make it very clear that they are indeed capable of doing some serious damage, as demonstrated when they effortlessly vaporized the Phantom 2 squad. But therein lies the question, why do these things, which are obviously capable of easily killing 106 whenever they want, leave him alive? What's the deal with that one part where they all show up in that little prison area? Most importantly, who are they? Well, if we want to try and answer the mystery of the Holeheads, first we must examine Subject 83. Subject 83, also called Object 83, the Monolith, the Shard, or the Crystal, is a giant blue amorphous artifact that Soviet soldiers built Site-83 around when they discovered it decades ago buried beneath the Siberian tundra, and it serves as the beating heart of Site-83's story. Before we begin, I want to apologize for my lore video where I said it was visually inspired by some dumb old space movie. I don't know what got into me to make me say that, but I do sincerely apologize. It's just that I've never actually played Stalker yet, and I wanted to for this video, but then I became too busy working on this video to actually get around to playing it. Alright, so what is Subject 83? Well, as I've said in previous videos, Subject 83 is not actually the big glass rectangular prism thing here, rather it's that weird fluctuating apparition housed inside of it. It was discovered by the Soviets in the 1970s, the Soviets all went missing, Horizon reopened Site-83 in 2035, and then 106 got sent in. Throughout the course of the level, bizarre occurrences happen frequently throughout the facility, and eventually 106 arrives at the Subject 83 containment chamber where the Phantom 2 squad is waiting for him. But as you saw earlier, the Holeheads appear and kill the entire squad while also disabling the power to the laser, causing 106 to have to engage in a strange ritualistic series of battles where the bodies of attacking Horizon mercenaries are electrified and absorbed by the Holeheads blocking the power boxes. When all three power boxes are reactivated and the laser is fully charged, 106 destroys Subject 83 and the mission ends. Now, of course, we're still left with many questions, mainly what exactly is the relationship between the Holeheads and Subject 83? There are times that can be interpreted as them working together, but also times where they seem to be working against one another. Just like the Shard, Holeheads do indeed guide 106 to areas he needs to go to, but they also play weird tricks on him, and there's even a time where the Shard teleports him away from them in that one part with the prison cells. Not to mention the ending battle where the Holeheads stop the laser from being fired at Subject 83 and only yield for 106 when they're given a nice yummy batch of electricity. So it seems like there's this strange contrast where Subject 83 wants 106 to destroy it, but the Holeheads seem to not want that. Some people consider the whole heads to be extensions of Subject 83's will, and while that could be the case, I think there's just too much to indicate that Subject 83 is an entirely different entity. In the end, however, we are given no real answer, and the whole heads along with the shard disappear with the rest of Site 83. Okay, so what is it that sets Subject 83 apart from any other encounter I've ever experienced in a game? Well, I think my answer to that question is that whenever I try to explain Subject 83, it always leaves me with a profound understanding of just how little I actually understand it. See, anybody can make an unknowable whatever in a video game. It's not hard to just throw random spaghetti at the wall and never give any real explanation on anything, but the trick is not to do that and instead give plenty of information but leave all the concrete answers just out of reach. There is clearly something at work here with Subject 83. It obviously has some kind of plan and purpose behind its actions, but we just can't begin to fathom them. As I've said in previous videos, even though Subject 83 is only encountered physically at the very end of the level, its influence is felt strongly throughout the entire mission. Intel logs emphasize that Subject 83 has three main supernatural powers: the ability to control electricity, the ability to teleport objects and people, and the ability to manipulate the world around it however it pleases. The big reveal of Subject 83 is essentially that it actually wanted 106 to kill it the entire time and was guiding him through the facility every step of the way. This is such a simple and brilliant way of framing the level. Now, anytime the Vox system says something strange or a door slams shut behind you or you get teleported, it doesn't become just a generic random haunted house scare, but instead the protective action of an ancient unknowable intelligence leading you to a superpowered laser gun that it wants you to blow it up with. See, every scare now has intent behind it, and not only illustrates Subject 83's strangely endearing concern for 106's safety, but also its extraordinary power, showing that it doesn't even need a physical body to exert its control. Okay, so this is all great. An ancient crystal under Siberia with incredible power wanting to die is already pretty unconventional and unique, but we still need to answer that final question. Why does Subject 83 have 106 kill it? Well, it never did. Now, to best illustrate my last point here, I'm actually going to take you over to another game real quick called Elden Monkey. Elden Monkey revolves around an awesome monkey guy in a medieval high fantasy setting who goes around and fights evil night guys and monsters to save the day, yada yada yada. The reason I bring it up here, however, is that in the world of Elden Monkey, there are these insanely cool and powerful eldritch beings scattered around the place. One of these beings is called Astel, natural born of the void, a terrifying alien life form born in a lightless abyss, unknowable to human minds, and when it came to this land, it leveled an entire city and took away its sky. And then the Elden Monkey comes along and beats it with a stick until it dies. See, all that lore and build-up about this thing supposedly being some unknowable eldritch horror goes right out the freaking window. The game said this thing destroyed a city and stole its sky. I don't know what that means, but it sounds freaking badass. But it got killed by a monkey pooing in his hand and throwing it. Narratively speaking, what difference does it make if the boss is really hard if it dies just the same to the almighty protagonist as a guy from level 1 does? See, all these games, they always hype up these crazy bosses, but none of them ever actually stick to their guns and validate their claims that they're really powerful monster things by actually not letting you beat them, because if they were really powerful monster things, they wouldn't be killed by some random stupid monkey. So, how does Subject 83 address this issue? How does Subject 83 actually commit to the idea of something being far more powerful than puny guns and swords?
It's not your time. Yes.
One line. That's it. That's all it takes. This one line recontextualizes everything that led up to this point. Now, instead of feeling triumphant after killing that thing, it's telling you that you didn't kill it at all. You set it free, and the only reason you're not dead is because it saved you. everyone else is dead, the only reason you even stood a chance is because it had use for you. And why did it save you? Not out of mercy, not out of thanks, but because it knows something you don't. It knows that you still have a part to play, and even in death it is still pulling your strings. No transformation into a second phase, no monologue, just 5 simple words letting you know that you don't know. Trepang2 is an enigma in more ways than one. It takes horror aspects at every level of sophistication and executes nearly all of them in a way that makes them feel ever so refreshing and fun. It twists and turns every familiar trope that you've gotten used to, and even if you don't think it's really that scary, I hope you still think it's as interesting as I do. Oddly enough, I actually find myself filled with a strange sense of dark wonder when I think about the horrific world of Trepang2. It really does feel like our own modern scientific world if magic and mythical creatures existed in it, but just like our world, it's not all black and white. Yeah, you got your Mothmans and your cultists and your Amazon flesh machines, but you also have benign aliens and helpful hullheads and protective Subject 83s. Subject 83 especially fills me with a strange sense of optimism because it somehow knew that 106 still had a chance to redeem himself and willingly gave him that opportunity so he could make the world a better place. That means that Subject 83, this disembodied essence with an unsettling degree of foresight and power, can still be viewed as peculiarly benevolent. So even in the world of Trepang2, where things like monsters and zombies and ghosts exist, not everything just wants to kill you. Some of them have bigger plans.